What is up, people? So today I have a new lesson for you, and it is a 7/8 shuffle. Before I get into this lesson, there's a lot of sheet music, a lot of notes, a lot of different time signatures, so you're gonna wanna download the sheet music in the description below. Go to that link, it'll take you to my website. Lately, I have been having some technical difficulties with my website, so if you go to the website and you can't get the sheet music because it's not letting you download it, please, I'm so sorry, but just shoot me an email. There's a banner at the top of my website right now that actually has my email in it. It's a red banner and it says click here to send me an email. You can send me an email that way, or just timbuellmusic@gmail. At any point, I'll send you this sheet music myself because right now my website is being a pain. But download the sheet music in the description below and let's get into it. So I was inspired to make this lesson. I transcribed a video recently by the drummer Nathan Camarena. It was a Meinl video. I'll link in the description. I just recently, last week, if some of you saw, I had a Dave Weckl video I posted and it got ripped for copyright. So I'm not gonna play the video that Nathan originally played, even though it sounds amazing. I'll put the link in the description because I don't wanna get dinged for copyright again. But I transcribed a short little excerpt groove. It's like 1, 2, 3. The original transcription I did is 7 bars long, and it's a super cool, most of it is in 7/8, and there's a bar of 9/8, which we'll get to. But the main groove that he's playing around, I was like, man, this is kind of super unique 7/8 groove because it kind of feels like a shuffle. And now obviously shuffles are typically in triplets, and they're typically in 4 felt in 4/4 and all of this stuff. But I wanted to kind of talk about this today because it's a 7/8 groove that, because of the hi-hat pattern and how it's accented, it sounds kind of crazy. So let me just play you the main groove and then we'll break out kind of what's going on. I have 3 examples for us today. The first 2 are 7/8 shuffles that, again, are just ripped right from this Nathan Camarena groove that I transcribed. And then the third example is kind of a fun little, not even a 7/8 shuffle, it's just kind of a fun 2 bars of 4 that were actually originally a 7/8 bar and a 9/8 bar, and we'll get to that. But let's jump in by just, let me show you the first groove we're gonna learn, and then we'll break out what's going on. Okay, so this is 7/8, and what that means is that a whole bar, a whole measure of 7/8 has 7/8 notes in it. And you'll notice most of this groove is in 16th notes. So let's just break it down, kind of beat by beat. I like to think of this groove as 3 different kind of phrases. So the first phrase is hi-hat and kick drum together, a ghosted snare drum, and then 2 hi-hat notes. But the second hi-hat note is accented. That's really important. Remember, I called this a 7/8 shuffle lesson because the hi-hat accents are really kind of what gives it the shuffly kind of feel. And without these hi-hat accents, you just kind of have, it's a cool 7/8 groove, but it doesn't feel like a shuffle. It loses something in translation if you don't have those accented 7/8, accented hi-hat patterns. So that first group of 4 that we just went over sound like this. Nothing too hard yet, right? Okay, so let's go over the second grouping. And the second grouping is even easier than the first one, and it's 2 16th notes followed by an 8th note. And the 8th note is where we get our accent. That's where we get our snare drum. That's where this whole groove kind of finds its, foundation. So these 3 notes we're about to go over are very important. So the first note is a ghost note, 16th note. Second note, 16th bass drum. And then there's that accent, snare drum, hi-hat together, backbeat, nice strong rim shot, not a ghost note. This is where the foundation of this groove is. This is the backbeat of this groove. So without it, everything falls apart. So let's go over those 3 notes. So far, we have 7 notes, and that last note is an 8th note. So let's go over all the notes we have so far. Pretty cool. So now we just have 6 notes left, and they're all 16th notes. So we start with 2 hi-hat notes, the second one being accented. Again, don't forget about that accent. It's important. It makes it feel like a shuffle. That's the whole point of this lesson. So 2 hi-hat notes, the second one's accented, 2 ghost notes on the snare drum, and then a kick drum and a hi-hat together, and a ghost note to end the measure. So that whole group of 6 sounds like this. So that's the first example, all slowed down, broken out, the 3 kind of movements of this measure. Let's put it to a click and do it at 60 beats a minute. Pretty cool. And remember, as you speed it up, don't lose the hi-hat accents. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like a shuffle. Make sure that rim shot, that backbeat is coming in strong. And make sure those ghost notes are nice and even, really, really low, really ghosted. But that's pretty much the whole groove. Yes, it's 7/8. Yes, it's a shuffle, but it's not that complicated. You just got to take it slow, work it, put a metronome on, and then slowly ramp it up over time. So let's go and let's try this whole groove out at a faster tempo. Pretty cool. So that's the 7/8 shuffle. You did it. Make sure those hi-hat accents are there and just start slow and build it up over time. You'll really know that you have this groove down and like it's part of you when you can play, you know, a 7/8 groove that you're used to playing and transition right into this. And this can kind of be not necessarily a fill, but this can kind of be, you know, if you're playing 7/8 and you're jamming to whatever groove you usually play in 7/8, and then you throw this in for 2, 3, 4 measures, it's going to be a nice like, ooh, this feels very interesting. This feels unlike a lot of 7/8 grooves. What's going on here? And then you're in, you're out of it, and it's like, whoa, that was cool. This is just another awesome thing you can add to your bag of tricks when you play in 7/8. Okay, 7/8 shuffle number 2. And this is the same exact thing we just got done playing in the first groove, but we're adding 2 kick drum notes. And you might be saying to yourself, what's the big deal? It's just 2 kick drum notes. These 2 kick drum notes really add a lot of weight. It adds a lot of in your face, like we're doing this. So it's a nice way, you know, like I said, if you use the first groove, and you go in and you're playing your normal 7/8 groove, and then you go in and you start playing that 7/8 shuffle from the first groove, do that for 2 measures, and then add this kick drum we're about to talk about for groove number 2, you add that for 2 measures, it's gonna add even more excitement, even more craziness. You do it for 2 measures, then you're out, you're back to playing your normal 7/8 groove, and people are gonna go, whoa, where did we just go? That was so cool. So let's talk about it. We're adding 2 kick drum notes, and we're gonna add those on the 3rd and 4th 16th note of this groove. So that first grouping, remember, is a hi-hat and kick drum together, a ghost note, and then 2 hi-hat notes. All we're gonna do is add on those 2 hi-hat notes, we're gonna add kick drum with it. And remember, you're adding kick drum, so there's another thing to think about. But that second hi-hat note that now has a kick drum with it too is also accented. You gotta make sure you don't lose those accents. So here is groove number 2 at 60 beats a minute. Here's groove number 2, 7/8 shuffle number 2, a little bit faster. right, that concludes the 7/8 shuffle portion of this lesson. So this third groove is kind of crazy. It's not even a groove. It's really a fill, and it's very busy. It's kind of insane. You're gonna need the sheet music to break it apart. It is absolutely insane. But to my ear, when I was originally transcribing this, it sounds like most of this example is in 7/8, but there's a bar of 9/8. And if you add 9 and 7, you get 16. 16/8 notes is 2 bars of 4/4. So I kind of just said, man, it would be fun to like kind of loop this thing. And it is fun, but it's also kind of crazy. So you'll notice that it's kind of the beginning of it is the same in this 4/4. You know, you have the kick with the hi-hat, ghost note, then the 2 hi-hat notes and a kick drum. That all is pretty familiar. You have 2 ghost notes, pretty easy. A kick drum, pretty easy. But then you have these 30-second note triplet figures that are kind of crazy. And if you watch the original video and you follow along with the transcription, those happen really fast. They are just a blur of notes. And then, typically, you would have this whole phrase would finish with the 2 ghost notes at the beginning of measure 2. But because I made it 2 bars of 4/4, it doesn't do that. Kind of gets crazy. So you're starting out the second measure on this really weird 2 ghost notes. After those 2 ghost notes at the beginning of measure 2, it's actually just the 7/8 shuffle like we're used to. So I'll play it for you now at 60 beats a minute. I know it's kind of crazy, doesn't make sense, but you know, for some of you that are advanced players or intermediate that want a huge challenge, I figured, why not? Let's just throw this in there and see what happens. So here it is at 60 beats a minute. And here it is at some faster tempos. So that's it. Those are the grooves, the 7/8 shuffle, and then the crazy, insane thing for the third example. It's just fun. And, you know, recently I played a gig last week, at the beginning of last week. I had 3 days where we had 1 full day of a rehearsal, and I had to learn 40 songs for it. And then after that 1 rehearsal of these 40 songs with, I think, 12 or 13 different artists, we went and taped it for television like the next night, the next 2 nights. So, you know, when I was doing that, you know, obviously that takes a lot of chart reading skills and a bunch of stuff, but one of the tunes was actually a Latin tune, and doing this gig and prepping for it kind of reminded me of, you know, this Latin tune would have been really, really hard for me to get a feel of and learn in such a short amount of time if I hadn't worked on Latin tunes before. But, you know, in college and then even after college, I've spent a lot of time working on Latin rhythms and Latin grooves and different, you know, samba patterns and bell patterns and all this stuff. And because I've worked on that stuff, when this chart came up, I wasn't that freaked out. I was like, oh, it's a Latin tune. And I wrote out what clave it was and whatever, and then I moved on with my life. And I say all that to say, you know, you can look at a lesson like this where it's a 7/8 shuffle and like, when are you ever going to use that? And, you know, sometimes you actually do end up using this stuff. And no, it's not all the time. It's not every day. But when the occasion arises and someone says, hey, here's this song in 7/8, or here's this section of this song that's in 7/8 or whatever, it doesn't have to freak you out because you've worked on stuff like this. So sometimes you actually end up playing stuff you think you never play. And then additionally, stuff like this, even though you don't use it all the time, really, really expands your ceiling for the level of player you are. So no, I don't spend a ton of time on actual gigs where people are paying me money jamming my 7/8 shuffle, but the fact that I can play this and lock it in with the click and play it at different tempos and different dynamics means that when I do show up for my paid gig where they're paying me to play this country music or this pop music or whatever, that gig's gonna be a lot easier if I can make 7/8 shuffles easy and sound good and sound groovy. If you can do that, you can play a pop gig, you know? So all of this adds to kind of your headroom and your overall musicianship and your overall ability. So, you know, sometimes I think people get really dismissive about lessons like this, and well, no, if you're having a hard time locking in with the metronome and learning songs, then maybe this isn't your first priority in your practice session, but stuff like this actually goes a long way, especially when you work a ton of different things like this over a long period of time. So that's my kind of thing to encourage you. Put in the comments, you know, do you practice stuff like this? Are you going to give this a shot? If so, tag me on Instagram, at Tim Buell. Put in the comments, like, do you work on odd times much? And if you do, you know, how do you do it? Do you transcribe stuff and then play it? Do you just kind of jam along with metronomes? Whatever. And if you want to see more odd time stuff, please let me know. Put it in the comments. And subscribe if you're new to the channel. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell because you'll get notified every time I put out a lesson, which is every week at this point, at least every week. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next one.